to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Jason Skeesick, Entrepreneurial Evangelist and podcaster. Please enjoy Jason Skeesick. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Jason Skeesick, Entrepreneurial Evangelist, podcaster, and I'm sure so much more, but welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Mari, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for sharing your audience with me today, and I just really cannot wait for this conversation.
Well, I am super excited to have you on the show to chat about creativity and your experiences and your world of creativity. But before we get to that conversation, if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to share a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. So for starters, my background is very broad, but there are through lines for it. So growing up, I've always been what I call spirit of the puppy. So that's one of my core values, and it's a part of the Spear and Clover logo that I have tattooed here on my arm.
Oh, nice.
And that means that I have boundless energy. I have nothing but love for adventure and meeting new people and play. And if I get interested in something, I go all in. And so even though I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur when I was young, I loved snowboarding. I worked at the snowboarding hill. I loved clothing. I worked at the mall. I liked cars. I worked at the car wash. You can kind of see where this is going.
Yeah.
And so it was very difficult to get me to be interested in some things in school, whereas other things that had my interest were incredibly easy. And I would go very, very deep and get just super excited about these ideas. People call that ADD. I prefer to call it entrepreneur's disease or the spirit of the puppy. After school, because this was not getting me very far in any one direction, I needed to find some discipline. And so I did what so many young men and women do, and I joined the United States Army. So I spent 4 years in the service in the Army. I was deployed twice overseas to Iraq, and I also got to live in Germany for about 2 years, which was fantastic. Coming back from the military, I did two things at the same time. One, I went to school for finance to pursue my degree and become a titan of industry, which certainly never happened. And at the same time, two other veterans and I started a CrossFit gym on a dusty fourth floor of a mostly empty warehouse in Chicago. And that gym is still going today, although not in the same location. And so what occurred to me then, as I was sitting in this high rise working on $20 million deals and $50 million deals, is that I could only really care about this tiny little tribe that we had built in that dusty fourth floor. And so over the period of time, through a circuitous path, I made my way to full-time entrepreneurship. And we really just doubled down on taking what I had learned from business and applying it to, go figure, my business. And we saw a dramatic shift in results. All of a sudden, we were having much better results for people. We were having much better financial results. Our tribe was growing, and very, very quickly fell in love with being an entrepreneur. In fact, we did so well that the person that I had as a mentor then asked me to start coaching other entrepreneurs for him. And I just fell in love with that. And I've never, even to this moment, have not been on a call with another entrepreneur like yourself and had less energy when I got off of that call than I did before I got on. And so over the course of time in COVID, I sold my gym, and my wife and I moved to the Indiana Dunes from Chicago. So we now live in a national park. And so it didn't feel right being the owner of that gym. And so I've completely focused myself on working with other entrepreneurs in the form of my podcast, the Spear and Clover Podcast, my mastermind, the Spear and Clover Mastermind, and we have a course for entrepreneurs called Dynasty Defined, where we take entrepreneurs through the process of building the foundations of their business and growing it from there.
Nice. I mean, such a, as you said, varied history, but you can see that line through it and follow it, and it makes a lot of sense. And finding
what brings you joy, and you can have the puppy energy, as you call it, about on the day-to-day basis and sustain it. I mean, talking about sustainable things and creativity being one of those things. When you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So up until November of 2021, I never would have thought of myself as being creative. However, I will tell you that when you're in the desert at war and your job is to drill a hole through a cement wall, by the way, I pulled cable. It was my job. I laid conduit in the ground and I pulled cable. Well, when you're in Iraq and a drill bit breaks, you still need to get the hole through the wall. And so I learned, when there was nobody coming to save me, myself and the team of young men and women that I was working with learned how to be creative and find solutions for any problem that arose, whether the big machine was broken and we had to grab shovels, or whether the truck was down, or we didn't have the right supplies that we needed. I learned that just by working together, we could overcome kind of anything through creativity. And so now, coming back as a young man, I was, I think, 26 when I returned home from 25 or 26 when I returned home from the Army. All of a sudden, there were no more walls. I only saw doors. And so I remember vividly coming back to Chicago, having just gotten back from the Army, and looking at down a street. It was a busy street in Chicago called Broadway. And there were all these doors, and all of those doors went to businesses. And I just remember thinking to myself, there's just no way that all of them are smarter or better than me at doing all the stuff that they're doing. And it was then that I knew that if I wanted to set a goal, that I could be creative and find solutions to achieving it.
Yeah. I love that. Everyone has a different answer to that question. What does it mean to you to be creative? And that's the beauty of creativity in my mind, that we all have a different experience of it. And to go from, I didn't think I was creative, to recognizing, I'm really curious, what helped you kind of turn the corner, so to speak, to say, oh, I actually am creative?
Well, I think mostly I've always been an imaginative person. I don't think I necessarily would have thought I wasn't creative, but I definitely didn't think of myself as like a creative artist. And I still, even to that moment saying that, don't know if I do, but I will tell you that what I learned from my father, who's a very crafty guy, my mother, who's also very resourceful, what I just learned was that when there's a problem in front of me, it's creativity that often finds the solution. And so what I will tell you is, the more problems I've solved and the more dire those problems were, the more weighty that those problems were, the more creative ultimately these solutions became. And so because of that, I felt more and more comfortable solving bigger and bigger problems easier. And so creativity for me has really been, it's why I almost respect a haiku more than I do a sonnet or something, or like long form poetry, is because it's actually it's the rules that make it brilliant, right? You had to be able to say this thing, or rap, right? Why rap is better than like just random spoken word. It's because there's this structure to it that requires you to fit, your message or your magic into a particular, format.
Yeah. It's so true to be able to craft your message into a form. That's where creativity, in my mind, really comes alive, because creativity really thrives in some structure. When you're given a blank piece of paper, it can almost be too freeing. But if you were given a blank piece of paper and you could only use the color black, that gives it enough structure to allow more creativity to solve the problem that's in front of you, as opposed to like, whatever you want to do could be anything. It's too much.
Well, I mean, to that point, it's in the real world, right? If creativity is creating something, it's something that doesn't exist. And so, it's not that interesting to me if I have a pencil to invent the pen, but if I need to write a letter and there's nothing around, I have no choices. I have to create that answer, right? And I just, there's something very, I think there's something very like utilitarian and like kind of beautiful about that. I don't know.
No, I agree. I think, what is it? necessity is the mother of invention, where
Mm-hmm.
when we face challenges, some of us rise to the occasion of getting through the challenge. And I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in your life, and how has creativity helped you solve them?
Well, I already covered sort of the military stuff. What I
Yeah.
will say is building a business with no money. I started it with two other friends. We each threw $3,000 in. So we had $9,000 on $1,000 a month rent. And we were building a rock wall and a CrossFit gym. So we got incredibly creative. We were able to source there was a local college, Loyola University in Chicago, that was getting rid of all of their old equipment. And we were taking lockers out of there and then scrapping those for cash to go buy. I mean, just any number of very creative paths. My first business out that I would call a business that didn't have an LLC or anything was when I got out of the military. I wanted a nice computer, which I had never had. I wanted a Mac, and I wanted a nice bike to get around town. And so I was like flipping bikes on Craigslist and flipping MacBooks on Craigslist. And that creativity led to me learning how to be a bike mechanic. I can build a bike from scratch now, and learning how to, completely wipe and upgrade and improve like a MacBook or whatever at that time. And so for sure, I think, by the way, I think now's maybe a good time to say that the definition I have for an entrepreneur is someone who sees the world as it could be and can't help but take action. And I just think there's something incredibly creative in that process. I think the entrepreneurs of the world are the people who are creating things that do not yet exist. Solutions to problems, offerings, conveniences, products, whatever it may be, venues, right? It's creating something that does not yet exist in the world. And I think at its best, that's what entrepreneurialism is.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. And, I think some people have that drive that it takes to be an entrepreneur and are willing to get to that edge of risk reward that some people really struggle with. You strike me as someone who is willing to, or you've said you kind of put it all on the line to reach that reward. Where do you think that comfort with taking big risks comes from?
There are two types of entrepreneurs. There's one who grows up wanting to be a big deal, wanting to make a lot of money, wanting to be well known, and then they go out and they find a mission. Good luck to those people. The second type are my favorite. These are people who have a mission that's so important to them, that's burning in their chest, that they can't wait to get it out, that it doesn't matter what stands in their way. They have to become entrepreneurs. I'm blushing right now thinking about these people. These are my people, right? These are the people where it's like, I don't know if do you identify as an entrepreneur?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. But even if you didn't, had you said no, I'd be like, good luck, because you are, right? The fact that we're here having this conversation means that it's a conversation that you thought must be had, not just with me, but in general. And I just think there's something so virtuous and admirable about anybody who would pass up comfort, pass up security, and instead strike out to make an impact on the world, to use the world as their canvas for this painting that they think is so important that they're willing to eschew Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all of their family's advice to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a risk, but I think, creativity supports risk taking. We, getting to that edge of our comfort zone is where creativity really comes alive in my mind, and being able to try new things and fail and learn and grow and continue to expand our comfort zone. And when, in your experience of entrepreneurship, what are some of the edges that you find yourself bumping up against that you're not, like, how do you know you have these edges, or there are no edges for you?
Well, I find that I thrive in structure. I loved art when I was young, so I certainly would think of myself as creative at that time. But when I look back on it, I don't think I could write a good song that didn't wasn't a response to another song. I could paint a good painting if I understood what they wanted me to paint. I never really had, in a vacuum, I don't just have a creative idea that I have to do. What a lot of my creativity and entrepreneurship as a result of that is based on someone else's need or my responsibility to those people. And so for years, I've owned real companies for 12 and a half years. And throughout that time, I've always had constituents. I've had stakeholders. I've had employees. I've had clients. I've had partners. And then I sold 2 businesses in 2 years, in the last 3 years. And I took 1 year off to spend time with my family, to start this podcast, which of course didn't make any money or anything, and to just do kickboxing, spend time with my family, do jujitsu, hang out, right? And one thing that I found was I would never do it again because I didn't have anybody that I was beholden to. I didn't have anybody that was expecting me, that was relying on me to come and be creative to help them. And so getting started again, I did a few things. Number one, I got a few clients, of course, but number two, I hired a local person who's like an absolute dream. His name's Mo. He's fantastic. Shout out to Mo. And it's almost like I'm better on behalf of my team. I'm better on behalf of my clients. And so for me, it seems like if I am an artist, then I'm one who definitely needs a muse.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that recognition is so important, that you really thrive. Your creativity thrives in that environment. And there's, many people in the world of creativity who say, surround yourself with your cheerleaders, your challengers, the people who have the financial backing for creative endeavors. But it sounds like that's part of your recipe for your success in
Have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
Yes.
I love that book. I would also just add that Rick Rubin's book just came out yesterday, and Rick Rubin is like the producer of all of the best music in the last 30 years. And he doesn't look like he would be. And it's so good about creativity and sort of looking at how to become aware and live as an artist. And I'm about maybe a quarter of the way through it, but it's just fantastic.
Nice.
So
I'm going to have to check that out for sure. That's awesome. Yeah. I imagine in your line of work, you come across many, many people who I'm sure some people feel that they're creative. Some people feel that they are not creative. For those people who don't think they're creative or struggle within their creativity, how would you encourage them to find creativity in their life?
I would argue that I think sometimes the labels we put on ourselves are hurtful. And I think also a lot of times they're inaccurate. I think we've already covered how creativity exists in all things. Whether it's how you sign your name, whether it's how you walk through your home, whether it's, the way that you work your way through a grocery store. These are creative endeavors, right? And so what I would say is, if you are interested in solving the problems that are in your life, or even just going through life in an effective way, you're probably being creative. And so if you don't think you're creative, it's probably a label that you've self-applied, or maybe it's been attributed to you by somebody in your life. But I would say that if you want to be creative, start small. If you want to be a bodybuilder or a power lifter or a race car driver, start small, right? And get tiny little wins every single day. Because what happens when you have a mountain of tiny little wins under you? Well, you're a winner.
Right.
and that's what we want. And so, maybe you can't write a screenplay that's going to go out and win Oscars or get millions of dollars of funding, but can you write a nice note to somebody? Can you write a well-crafted tweet? Can you shoot a text that gets somebody to laugh? Absolutely you can. And so I just, I'm being optimistic, and I am certainly an optimist, but I think so much of our own limits are either self-ascribed or the beliefs that somebody else attributed to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's that TED Talk, one of the most watched, viewed TED Talk. It's about how education robs us of our creativity. formal
believe that.
education. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at the tail end. I think right now the Industrial Revolution and World War II are like, we're like running on the fumes of that empty gas tank. And I think that we're about to come into a time where more and more people will be able to be creative. I mean, even right now, if you look at entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, if you look at side hustles, and really, if you look at the gig economy, even though it's not entrepreneurship, you are choosing the battleground. You choose when you work. You choose if you're doing Grubhub or you're doing, Uber or something like that. So a much larger percentage of the population now has not just access to, but like the freedom to just have a flexible job, stay at home work, these types of things. And so I think that schools that have been set up around this idea of, showing up to an office, putting in 8 hours, and then working towards some grade, that's very much a product of the Industrial Revolution. And gosh, I don't know where it's going, Mari, but I am waiting with bated breath to see, because I have an 18-month-old in the other room.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. And it brings up what you had shared before we started recording about where kind of creativity is moving into that AI world as we're headed into a little different space of what is considered creative. And do you want to share your piece about that?
Sure. So for starters, Stephen Pressfield wrote The War of Art, and he talks about the concept of resistance. And certainly there is this almost like an invisible hand, right, of resistance that creative folks feel from time to time. And sometimes it's somehow miraculously gone, and it feels like the words just flow or the art just flows or whatever. For me, the entrepreneur, and I'm sure that anybody listening to this, regardless of what you do, will be able to relate to this. When I have a creative idea, it's almost stomped out before I exercise it, because I know of all the back end work that I'm going to have to do. So I'll give you an example. If I wanted to create a course on how to, launch your business, let's say, that gets me really excited. You know what doesn't get me excited? All of the copy that I'm going to have to write around it. Not the video, me recording it, not me talking about it, not somebody else watching it, or me doing my mastermind, or being on the phone with you today, or on the call with you today. But those little things, the email campaigns, the Facebook ads, the posts that I'm going to make, the blog articles I'm going to make. Well, the nice thing about it is with something like ChatGPT or whatever will replace it as artificial intelligence, I have the ability to do much more of that 10% creative work, and the 90% of busy work is compressed substantially. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example. I wrote a book in one day. I don't know if I'll release it or not. I have some ethical concerns with that, but I did write a book in one day, and it's pretty gosh darn good. It's actually not bad. And it's actually a little bit like what I would write. I tuned it, with my prompts to kind of give it the responses that I would want. I also made a course in one day on how to use ChatGPT to generate courses, using only ChatGPT to generate the course, kind of like a meta project.
Yeah.
And in one day, from 8 a.m. to 9:30 p.m., I conceived, generated, made slides, filmed, edited, published, and marketed the entire course. It's available for free on my Instagram at Jason Skeesick. And really, and by the way, somebody told me today they made $3,000 using what they learned in that course in 1 hour.
Wow.
So you can go in and you can use this to flex your creative muscle more frequently. And so when somebody like you, or maybe somebody even like me, is able to do that, all of a sudden the weight is off of that creative muscle. And so all of the sudden I can just be so much more creative. In fact, if there's going to be a problem out of this, I mean, short term, about in the context we're talking about, not like Terminator. But if there's going to be a problem, it's that I could conceivably release like 30 programs and then not support them or focus on them or something like that. And so I have to be a little more picky about my creativity.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. We should. Discernment is good. Like, how much can we support to put out there as one person, or unless you have many, many people. But I appreciate this kind of experiment that you did around.
Check it out. It was cool. It was a lot of fun. And it's not gonna change the world. It's not like here's how you do it to go make money. It was
Right.
much more me choosing this project to sort of stretch myself into. And so it made me learn it so much better. And I recorded the entire process, so you can watch me do it, and the prompts that I enter and what I delete. I actually only edited with the delete key. I didn't add anything, except for in the video where I go, everything from here on in that you see was generated by AI. And then everything after that point was.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole new way of looking at creativity, because I think oftentimes, as you said, we have those ideas and then there's the weight of, what is it going to take for me to actually do all the work to get it out there? And I think a lot of times people really like that initial idea and then don't take that idea to do anything, because it's a lot of work to get an idea out there.
I think if anything, I recently posted about this. There's so many people. You can meet a 60-year-old person working behind a cash register who's going to be a millionaire in their mind. There's so many people who never scratch the surface of those itches. And I think if anything, this will allow them, if they choose to engage with it, will allow them to scratch those itches and actually face whether or not they're willing to take the steps they need to get where they want to be. Because if you want to be a copywriter or a songwriter or write websites or create a business or make a meal plan or make a workout plan, or I genuinely could do this for any job in America except for like digging holes and driving trucks at the moment, but look out, because that's coming too. If you want to do that, now there's reason to say that you actually absolutely can. You just have to be the person that does it. And so it's actually you deciding not to do it. Yeah.
It brings it back to that, like, do you want to flex your creativity or not?
It sure does. Yeah.
And how are you going to sustain it, your creativity in your life?
Yeah. So it's funny. I was coming home it was like November. I was coming home from the airport. This is before I knew what ChatGPT was, by the way. Coming home from the airport, and I saw this guy standing on one of those really long airport escalators. And I remember thinking, I was just one guy, and he was just slowly standing. He was looking at his phone. And I was like, the person who designed the escalator did it so we could get places faster. And how many, what percentage, almost 100% of us use that as an opportunity to be lazier. And then if you think about it, it's like, well, that's my cell phone too, right? And that's my TV, and that's hopefully not AI, right? If we use AI to be lazier, we certainly can.
Yeah.
Or we can use it for what it's really for, which is to be much, much more prolific and exciting.
Right. Good reminder, for sure.
Thank you. I need you to just check in with me once a week and be like, you're doing a good job.
Yeah. I love it. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This has been such a fantastic chat about creativity and experience and problem solving. And I just have one last question for you. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Usually one of two things. Usually I can feel like muscles firing. Like if I'm watching a fight, let's say, like if I'm watching like a UFC fight or something, I can feel like my empathetic nervous system, like trying to win this fight, but actually it's funny. So that's what it feels like when I'm out in the world solving problems and being creative, like in a meeting or on a call or while I'm on my whiteboard, which I keep right here. But the other way is quite the opposite. Every month I go and I take a float tank. I go into a float tank where it's sensory deprivation and I'm in total blackness and I'm totally still. And it's almost like I'm not even in my body. And there have been the last 3 businesses with LLCs that I've started have all been fully formed walking out of a 90-minute float. And so there was one time for this company Shine, which never opened. It was supposed to open in like March of 2020. And it was brick and mortar. So, but either way, I went into a float and I was like, I want to do a new business. I need to solve this problem, which I won't go into detail for, but, and I went into that float. And by the time I came out, I knew the address, I knew the branding, I knew the logo, I knew everything about that business. Just by like, I sort of, I view when I'm doing problem solving or creativity, I think of like my business as an engine diagram that's like exploded. and I just look at it and put it back together in its most efficient form. And so that's what I did. And that's what comes out of that.
I love it. I love all of these pieces, that what it feels like and what it looks like and how you're creating it for yourself and experiencing it for yourself in the moment. So thank you for sharing all of these pieces.
Sure.
If people wanted to learn more about all of the things that you do, how could they go about doing that?
Well, for starters, if you're still listening to this, it's because you like Mari and you like this show. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share this show. And if you still have energy after that, I would love to invite you to come and test drive my mastermind for entrepreneurs. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you think you might like to be one, I do a mastermind. It's the first and third Friday of every single month. And you can book a free test drive of that mastermind at my website, www.spearandclover.com. You can also find me, of course, on all of the social media platforms as Jason Skeesick or Spear and Clover. And you can find my podcast, the Spear and Clover Podcast, across YouTube and all audio platforms. Thank you so much for having me, Mari.
Awesome. You are so welcome. I'm going to put all of that information in show notes so people have easy access. And thank you for taking the time to chat with me. It has been such a treat.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I agree.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.